MegaMan 2. He's back. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
Guys, the sequel of sequels. No, that's not true. There are plenty of games that we've been waiting for that have gotten sequels. But a lot of times with these sequels, you know, Super Mario Bros. 2, Castlevania 2, Zelda 2, a lot of times it's like a completely different game. Now, I don't know what you guys know about Mega Man, but were you expecting a completely different game for Mega Man 2?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think I've played half a dozen Mega Man games, and they all feel exactly the same. So I was thinking Mega Man 2 is probably going to feel like a Mega Man game.
Yeah, I haven't played a ton of Mega Man, but I also just am aware that they're all very similar. And I think it would have been very surprising if this was like a totally different style game. It was like some top-down game or something.
Yeah, it's like
it's
in
an
this
RTS
one,
now.
Yeah, exactly. You're in an RPG and you have to travel from town to town taking down the robot masters. What's interesting, though, is like that is a thing, you know, that we're seeing with all major beloved sequels so far, is that they are different. And so with Mega Man 2, it's actually just a lot of cut assets that they didn't have time for in Mega Man 1 that they were like, well, we got enough of this stuff. We could make a second game. And Capcom was like, all right, sounds great, but we're not really going to pay anybody to make the game. Like, you guys have to make this on your own time. And that's what they did. They said the sales were abysmal. And if you guys want to make this, you'll have to do it, you know, like on the hours where you're not working on our other Capcom games.
I guess I completely forgot that, like, if we talked about that in the first one, that it wasn't really that well received, because that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, Mega Man is an essential game for us right now, and we're entering that with the expectation that, like, sometimes the sequels become essential games and other times they don't. Yet here, you know, because the sales were unimpressive and it had that weird box art. Remember, we did that whole thing about, like, the North American box art and then, like, the movie poster European box art. With Mega Man 2, it really does seem like a surprise that it's getting a sequel at all, let alone how many sequels it's going to get on just the NES. Joe, any thoughts on the original Mega Man leading up to Mega Man 2?
Well, I was going to replay it, but I ended up just playing Mega Man 2 right now. So in my memory of Mega Man 2, this feels very similar. But when I really think about it, like I can sort of feel some improvements in Mega Man 2. So like there are some things in Mega Man 1 that I remember being almost unfair. Not like just difficult, but I remember there were items that you absolutely needed that you could miss that could make you have to restart the game and stuff. And I just noticed while playing this game, one thing it seemed to have learned from its original game was to not do that. But they didn't just take that kind of thing out. They like found an interesting solution to it, which I'm sure we'll get to later. But I think that maybe this is going off a little bit away from what you asked, but I think that as a sequel, this is like a really good example of how video game sequels often are improvements on the originals, unlike movie sequels. So like so far we've had, like, you know, if we have Mario and Zelda, which both happen to have really good sequels, but like it was almost like in spite
Mario.
of themselves. Okay, get out of here. But it was almost like in spite of themselves, like the way that they went about it, like they could have easily failed at making a good game because they totally changed everything. Where luckily they didn't, but in this case, instead of totally changing everything, it seems like they learned from what they did in the first game. They got better at game design, they added a couple new elements, and they improved inwardly instead of trying to branch out too far into something that makes it a totally different game. And I think that that's what I noticed from video game sequels, even like today, when a video game sequel comes out, it always feels like, okay, now they've taken that like base that they built in the first game and built on it. And I know that is totally a long tangent and not really answering the question you asked.
No, I think that's answering the question. Mega Man 2 is is an iterative change from Mega Man 1. It's basically the same game, but the presentation's better. It's much more streamlined. Like you said, like those big flaws of like, oh, this is something you might miss, and you're kind of soft locked in the game. Like that's all been fixed. Yeah, it's an iteration that improved upon the original.
Yeah, I like that idea too of there are certain games that are doing their own thing, and then there's what we already know. I mean, we're in the future. Like we know that all these Mega Man games are gonna follow this, but in some ways, Mega Man 2 is just another attempt at making the same game again, right? Like, okay, well, we learned from like Mega Man 1, and now we're just going to take the parts that were good, or like, let's increase the scope, or let's make the power-ups more more interesting to the platforming. We saw that in Mega Man 1 with like the magnet beam that would create platforms for you and stuff like that. In this game, they're giving you 3 unique power-ups that, granted, you have to clear a certain stage to receive, but these 3 power-ups are not like weapons. They are for your platforming benefits, and I think that takes a whole new approach to what the Mega Man levels are about, because in the first game, I really feel like the platforming challenges and just the design of the levels in general were more just about making sure that you either survived to make it to the Robot Master to acquire his weapon, or just a platforming challenge of like, here are some blocks that are appearing, or here's, you have to make sure that you jump at the right time or else the platform will disappear. There was a lot of that in the first game, and it's not completely gone in the second game, but it becomes more of a challenge in terms of like the core gameplay of taking down enemies and acquiring their power-ups and using those new power-ups than just like, and I think, Joe, this is what you were saying, the ruggedness of the first game, which maybe at times felt a little unfair.
Yeah, I can see that. Not, I actually hadn't thought of it that way, as far as like the gameplay loop being more based on like your combat and not quite as, I mean, it's still also very heavily based on platforming, but yeah, it feels like it got a little more like fluid in that sense. Like everything is very clearly still well thought out and designed, but it doesn't necessarily feel like the whole time is like, stop, think about what to do next, do it, stop, think about what to do next, which I feel like there was a lot of that in the first game. It's like, okay, what do I do on this screen? What do I do on that screen? Whereas this game feels more just like you keep moving, and it's all happening, all that same stuff's happening, but like more fluidly.
Yeah, there's less situations where I died because, not so much because of the platforming, but because of the combat interfering with the platforming. Like, I remember dying a lot more from like knockback in Mega Man than I did in this game. Like that definitely still happened, but it seemed to be a lot less egregious here. And I think that's a good illustration of what I think you're talking about.
So Mega Man 2 does, like, if we're going to get into the story at all, which is very brief, it takes place in the year 20XX, just like...
It's just that's 200X, hello.
2000X, sorry, yeah. 20XX are the Mega Man X games. That's why they're called Mega Man X, because it adds the extra X to the year. So in the year 2000X, a super robot named Mega Man, created by Dr. Light...
was standing on a building...
Yep, just standing on a building, being like, "This is my city," and Dr. Wily better not fuck up this shit. And of course, Dr. Wily, after being defeated in the first game, comes back. Although apparently, and maybe we talked about this in the first one, but I couldn't remember. In this one, it says he's creating his own 8 robots to counter Mega Man. In the first game, were they just like other robots of Dr. Light's that like
they were?
No, that's very interesting.
We had I think we had a conversation about how, like, yeah, there was just, like, the construction robots and, like, the gun robots that definitely were built for peace.
Right, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess that now that's some plot development there. Wow.
Yeah, and it's like if those ones were built for peace, but now you look at these ones and there's like a walking fan, like that's built for violence.
Right, or the leaf guy, the guy
the
who
leaf guy. He's
leaves.
like, I'm gonna build my own mega killer robot, and he's like, leafs. That's what we need.
Although real Mega Man fans will kill us if we don't refer to these guys by their names. So
Leaf
that guy
Man.
He's Woodman.
Oh, Woodman.
Not
That's
Leaf
right.
Man.
Sorry.
Yes.
And then what's the fan? Was he Wind?
Airman.
Airman.
Yeah, it's always what you think it would be, and then just say the opposite.
Right.
Because obviously, trees have leaves, which means that he's made of wood, not Leaf Man, Woodman.
Right.
I guess, just one quick thing in my thought there on the story, though, is that, like, this, and other NES games are guilty of it, too, but, like, this is an example of a game that gives you, like, maybe just the right amount of story for, like, what an 8-bit video game should be, right? Like, you just kind of get a reason to be doing your thing. You don't need, like, a whole journey or anything like that. Although we do like the hero's journey. I like that a lot in Ninja Gaiden. But, you could take it or leave it with these plots, right? Like, am I going to have to remember or care in Mega Man 3 what happened in 1 or 2? It may as well just be a unique game each time, just like how Super Mario Brothers may as well just be a unique game each time.
Yeah, but I feel like it sort of is. Like, I mean, I don't know about what comes later, but I feel like it's like a unique game each time with a small little through line. Right?
Yeah, I'm not arguing. I'm not arguing about the plot, though. I don't want you to think like I'm saying, like, did they even need to include this? I'm just saying, like, it's a nice, refreshing thing where, like, it's the sequel to a game and you don't need to know anything about the first one.
Right.
I didn't need to remember that they were creations of Dr. Light in the first one and now they're made by Dr. Wily.
Yeah, in fact, I didn't remember that. When it worked out fine, so...
Right. Lore that's there for you if you want it.
Right.
We're talking a lot about improvements, though, and I feel like, for me, the biggest improvement was just the addition of another difficulty mode. So there is the easy mode and then the normal mode. I was just shocked to see this even included, given the track record of North American games usually just getting the harder mode from Japanese games, not an easier mode. In this one, I played the easy mode version just because I'm not really that good at Mega Man games. I don't have enough experience with the levels, playing them over and over again and getting that stuff right. And I gotta say, this easy mode is such an improvement over any gripes I really had with Mega Man 1 in terms of the amount of health you receive and the amount of damage you do to enemies. I really enjoyed just the pacing of the game a lot more under easy, but was glad that normal was there too if I wanted a more difficult experience.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with that too, where I feel like first of all, the easy mode is actually called normal on our game. So it's like they didn't trust us to be as good at video games. So our normal mode is what is the new easy mode. And then the other mode is difficult, which is their original mode.
They didn't there was only one mode in the original release.
Right,
which is usually like the opposite of what
we get the harder one.
Right. Yeah. And I also was like, I was kind of happy to see the easier mode, and it was nice because I was able to just jump into it, play it. It was still a challenge, but I felt like I could learn it and everything. But I would have been upset if there was just the easy mode, because I do want to, like, when I play a game like this, especially when it's well designed like this, I want to get better at it, and then I want to try to challenge myself more. So, like, I love having the option then to go play the difficult mode, even if I have to swallow my pride a little bit and remember that, like, a whole country of people, this is just their normal mode, and I have to play on the baby mode first before I can get to the hard mode. But it is nice to have that option, and it was much more accessible to me with the easy mode to just pick it up and play it, a couple minutes here and there rather than trying to practice. And then later, I can try out the difficult mode when I feel good enough at it where I want to challenge myself.
I guess the one thing that I didn't entirely appreciate about the difficulty setup was, like, some enemies just behave entirely differently. Like, I forgot what level it's in, but there's this, like, stack of cans, basically, and you have to hit the right can with the face on it, and then it does damage to the enemy. Whereas in the normal mode, it will just blow up and disappear when you shoot that. In the difficult mode, it'll actually sort of become a bunch of projectiles that get thrown at you, and you have to dodge those too. And I understand that like that is adding difficulty, but I think it's also adding just like one little interesting thing about an enemy, and that's lost to the difficult mode.
I don't know. I sort of like that, actually, because that also gives me another reason to replay it in difficult mode, that where the challenge isn't just that the enemies have more health or their projectiles do more damage to me. You know, it gives me more to like, okay, now it's harder because things are happening differently. I gotta think a little differently. I gotta react a little differently. I sort of like that in games that do that. Like, I've played other games, Kingdom Hearts being a big one, where like the difficulty mode is just, okay, you take 3 times the damage and you only do 1/4 the damage. And like, that's great, and that does make a challenge, but it would be cool to see like bosses doing different things that are harder to actually like deal with, if it's done right, you know, if it's done well.
Okay.
Yeah, and Sean, that's an interesting point too, because I'm just looking at that now. You know, I admittedly only played on the easier mode, the normal mode, but that is like a rare example on the page here. They actually don't have too many other examples of enemies that behave differently between the modes, and I actually wish that they had more of that, right? Like, that is, to Joe's point, like, that's a cool thing that like adds to, you know, like, oh, you think you know this enemy, but now they're behaving differently. I do wonder if, like, you know, those birds that drop the eggs, right? If they would be more strategic on when they drop them, because it's pretty easy to destroy the egg before it hits the ground, right? Like, if there's things like that in the more difficult mode, that would make sense. Like, that would be a cool thing to do. I wonder how much of the inclusion of easy mode, though, comes down to just like, well, the sales of the first game weren't that impressive because word spread that it's hard. Like, there's no way to verify that or anything like that. But like, it does feel like easy mode is a direct answer to like people complaining about the difficulty, specifically just the health, though, right? Like, you're really not given a ton of like health regeneration throughout very long levels in Mega Man 1, whereas in Mega Man 2, I actually found, you know, maybe this is only happening in the easy mode, but I found they were giving just way too much health out, especially like the bigger yellow balls that give you like almost like a full health bar back. Like,
yeah,
those were happening pretty often.
Yeah, I guess the way that you look at like stuff like the enemy differences and the health compensation, I guess, really depends on what way you're looking at it, as like normal mode being the correct way to play, or the difficult mode being the correct way to play. Because if you look at it as like what it is, which is a sort of pared down version of the original design, then you're actually sort of being shortchanged a bit by like this like you're losing some stuff instead of like it being a designed hard mode that adds these features, and I guess also messes with balance by just giving health out willy-nilly. So I guess I look at it more as like, oh, this is the stripped down version, instead of like, oh, the difficult one is just the one that has more stuff going on. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it does, like, yeah, to your point, it does depend on like how it's done, which I don't know. I didn't play the difficult mode, so like it does sound like maybe that was just one where like they can figure out a way to make it easier. So they're like, let's just make it just die when you kill it. But like, if it were done,
no, I meant more like just the perspective that you're using. It being like, is this the original way to play the game, or is this that's more what I mean.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, like are they adding things to the difficult mode, or are they taking things away from the easy mode?
Yeah.
This time we also have 8 robot masters instead of 6, and, you know, in some ways that's just like a natural thing to like make a game bigger, right? Is like have more stages, have more enemies and stuff like that. But in Mega Man, that's an interesting like addition, because now you're talking about a lot more power-ups too. And, you know, this whole rock paper scissors mechanic of like some really do extra damage to enemies and others actually don't hurt enemies at all, or they're the enemies like own power so it doesn't do anything. It's very interesting to see the game expand with the additional 2 levels, considering that there's also like a whole second half of this game. I'm just curious, first let's just talk about the Robot Masters here for a minute. Do you guys remember the Robot Masters in Mega Man 1? We really liked those boss fights. They felt unique and challenging to each one. At a certain point, you even fight yourself as a cloned version of your own Mega Man where he switches to whatever power-ups you are. Curious to hear if the Mega Man 2 Robot Masters are just kind of the same idea as the first one, or if they improve upon them.
I think that they're still just as unique. I still think that there's better and worse ones. Like, I made the mistake of doing Bubble Man first and had basically a useless weapon for the first couple rounds, the first couple levels. But I do think that like their design is different enough to still be compared to the original Mega Man of like, oh, these are unique boss designs, some more unique than others. I think they're on the same track.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly I remember some of the people. I remember there was Cut Man, and there was the Electricity Man or Electric Man.
It's Elecman?
Elecman?
Yes, I think it is.
Oh, they probably couldn't fit Electricity Man on there.
I think that's just his name, Vincent Elecman.
Yeah, that's his last name, Elecman.
Yeah.
But it does seem like I know people kind of like there's people make fun of the Mega Man bad guys over time because there are just so many of them, and it's like when you run out of ideas. But if you really think about it, like if you're willing to get a little silly, you'll never run out of ideas. You can make anything an enemy. It's just I think it's kind of cool the way that they keep coming up with like new things for the enemies to do. There was Flash Man, which I don't really fully understand why he's Flash Man and his power is to freeze time, but that's a cool different like gameplay
like Flash
mechanic.
It's like Flash freezing. I
guess that makes
Oreos
sense. Yeah,
or
freezing.
something.
But yeah, like that's a different gameplay mechanic that's totally changes the way you think about the enemy, and once you get the power up, the way you think about the game, and it's not just like they're not just like reskins necessarily of the original. Like, does anyone remember what Fireman did in the original?
I believe I think it was like made of fire.
Did he like shoot just did he have the same power up as Heat Man, or was it like different enough?
I actually don't remember, to be honest.
Like that's one of the ones I'm wondering if it was similar, but I'd have to go back and play it. But for the most part, it does feel like these all are pretty unique.
Yeah, and I think I'm trying the Heat Man one. You can hold down the attack button, right, and then throw like larger fireballs.
Yeah,
couldn't do that. You couldn't do that in the first game.
Well, you know what? I didn't know that, actually.
Okay.
So I didn't use Heat Man correctly the whole time, but I still used him.
No. It's fine. Yeah, he's still. I mean, like as long as you used him in the correct, appropriate battle.
Well, yeah,
you were still winning the advantage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but yeah, it would have been. Maybe I should have tested that out.
The interesting thing here is like, and we could talk about the power-ups and things. I think that's different than talking about the Robot Masters. But I actually thought this time, for the most part, the stages thematically were a lot better for the, for the Robot Masters. So you have like Bubble Man, right? And his first you see like a giant waterfall, and then you go into the water, and then like you're able to jump as high as you possibly want, because technically that's just swimming. And I thought that was like really cool, because then they have, platforms that, like, if you hit them, it's immediate death. I think they look like sea urchins to me, but I have no idea what they're supposed to be.
They're just spikes.
Just spikes, sure. And then you have Quick Man, which has those, like, laser beams, which, it's like a two-sided thing, right? One, it's really cool for the stage, but, like, man, was that not some of the most frustrating shit
worst
in this game?
Like, that is, you're right, that is the best example of, like, the thematic use of level design going with the boss and just like how Mega Man games are designed. But I hated that fucking level because I had to play it dozens of I think like maybe 6 or 7 times before I could get past all those lasers.
Yeah, I feel like you're screwed if you don't play Flashman first to get the power up to slow down time.
And I didn't do any like research about like the strategy of what level to go to.
Well, that's
first
the correct way to do it, Sean, is to not have the strategy. You were playing the correct way.
No, I think the correct way is to have like that metal blade.
I don't know. You're not getting that like first. You're not getting that like first experience.
Yeah, I agree too. Where it's like it's like that trial and error, kind of like learning it. Like I think the correct way would be to go there. If you end up there without the time stopping power up or whatever power up you need, and then you realize like, okay, I'll come back to this. Then you get the time power up, then you're like, oh my god, this will be perfect for that level. Like,
no, I do like that like aha moment. Yeah, for sure. I was just making a remark
I know you were,
about that weapon, but I think also in terms of comparison to Mega Man, not so much thematically, but the levels look just much more like designed to fit their boss more. Like I remember the original Mega Man, like just the look of each level was kind of blandish.
Yeah, you're just kind of like outside of the city, right? Like you can always see these buildings and stuff in the background, but you're not really anywhere.
Yeah, there was never anything fun in the background. Like in this one, like you see like moving gears and like all the they're better like matte paintings, I guess, in this game.
Yeah, and then there's also just like, I don't know, certain levels just have varying difficulties in sense of like, they always have enough health to go on, right? Like you can kind of farm enemies in this game since they always just spawn if you move off stage. If you really need health, you should just wait it out and attack an enemy that's easy to defeat until you get the health that you need. But I'm thinking about the ones that have like, they're not bosses themselves, but they're harder enemies. Like in Woodman stage, he has those giant dogs.
Oh,
and it's like, what is going on? Like those dogs are just so much more powerful than any of the other enemies. It's like I thought that was the boss the first time I ran into it, and then I had to fight it like 2 or 3 more times.
Yeah, and it took me a few times to come up with an actual way to fight those without taking an obscene amount of health, taking an obscene amount of damage. But yeah, those and the I forgot the name of the guy. They're in a lot of Mega Man games, but the ones that are in like the mechs, like those were kind of difficult too. And I do like I'm glad that these games have a wider variety of enemies and not just like a variety of like one sprite enemies like we've seen in a lot of other games. Like there are some that could be seen as mini bosses, some that can be seen as just like just a common, but at least like a variety in presentation for enemies too is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sean. You're not just dealing with Goombas and Goombas with projectiles.
Yeah.
Like the mech guy you're talking about, apparently his name is Sniper Armor, but like you can defeat the mech and then he actually jumps out of the exploding mech and then you have to fight him.
Yeah.
Like that's a fun thing. There's that other guy who's in the Metal Man stage where he's like on a gear and you shoot the gear that he's like rolling on first and then you have to kill him. Like he's not dangerous or anything, but you have to make sure that you take out both of them. They're not just like they're not together. They're not a conjoined twin.
Or you kill him and you have to dodge the gear still.
Yeah, exactly. Or in Airman stage, the fan thing, the guy who has like a fan for a body. Not an annoying enemy, doesn't really do anything to you, but if you're just kind of rushing through the level and you don't notice him, he might blow you off the platform.
Yeah, it was cool the way that they like interact with you other than just attacking you, or they interact with each other. Like it felt more, I don't know, more like a lived-in like real place. Whenever there's giant fan belly people, it makes me think of real places.
Yeah, Mega Man definitely is designed for people.
Yeah.
Let's talk about those platforming additions, right? Because other than the main power-ups you get, there are 3, I'm going to call them platforming power-ups. Where
you mean item 1, 2, and 3?
Is that really what they're called in the game? I can't remember.
Yes.
But that's funny. We'll call them platforming power-ups, and one is like a levitating platform, the other one is like a jet that you get on and rides you across a stage, and then the third one actually can climb walls, although you kind of have to figure that one out a little bit by yourself, or look at the manual, I suppose, because when you first deploy it, it looks like it's just designed to like hop through the stage.
Oh yeah, you just sort of throw it.
Let me hear, Joe, what'd you think of the addition of platforming power-ups instead of just, weapons?
Well, I think it was great. I think that this is their solution to the problem we had with the first game. Because wasn't it a platformy thing that you needed? Like a platform gun that you needed, or something that would get you up higher?
The magnet
gun,
yeah.
That's right. And like that, you needed that to progress. Whereas this is like a similar thing where it's like interacting with the environment in a way that'll get you through it. But I'm assuming it gives you each of these items, like every time you beat 2 or 3 stages, you get item 1, and then after 3 more stages you get item 2, and after the next 2 you get item 3 or whatever. So that way when you get to the stage where you need those things, you have to already have them, and it's all about just thinking about how to use them. I will say that I did never use item 3. I never had a reason to. I never found a reason to. So that felt a little weird, but
I think those are more for like shortcuts.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
If anything, item 2 is the one, the jet. That's the guy. But Sean, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I guess mine's not really a complaint. In more so, I just wish that they had taken the opportunity to like not separate them out. Like, oh, these are the items you use to like do damage to enemies, and these are the items you use to move around the world. I would have thought it would be cool if they combined those. Like, I always like games that have abilities that have more than one use. So sort of separating them out felt a little basic to me, but I did appreciate like that at least they were thinking about more than just how to inflict damage. Just could have been a bit more creative about it.
That's a great point, though, Sean, because if you think about it, right, like the jet, the one that we all think is the most useful, that one you get for defeating Airman, right? So what's stopping you from instead making the tornado-like air projectile something that you can hop on and ride as well? So this way it's like it does damage to enemies, but you can also ride through it. But if you come into contact with an enemy on it, then it disappears. Like, you can't just continue to roll steam through it. It's like it does have 2 functions without being too op.
Yeah.
That does make me think, though, like, what is the point of hiding these behind particular boss battles when you're already receiving a power-up? Controversial here, but I kind of feel like you could have just started with these 3, and it could have just been included in the story that Dr. Light's like, oh shit, Wily's back, and this time he made his own robots, so I gotta upgrade MegaMan and give him these 3 power-ups. He should just start the game with them, so this way there's no, like...
I still think that they should be sprinkled in, just so that you're not overwhelming the player with all these new options. But I don't think they should be locked behind specific bosses, but like just whatever the first 2 bosses you get number 1, and then after the next 2, number 2, and so on and so forth, just so that like you have more options the more you go through the game, but it doesn't really have these weird arbitrary connections to any one boss.
Yeah, it also gives you the opportunity. It gives the developers the opportunity to put things into their levels that the player will say, like, oh, how can I possibly get to that? And then later on, when they get the power up, like next time they're playing the game, or next time they're playing that level, they can be like, oh, like if I get that power up first, I can come back here and ride that up to the it leaves room for little secrets and stuff.
Yeah.
But also to what you guys were saying about like separating them out a little bit, I think that even if they had, I did also think it was weird that it like this platform, whether you're talking about the vertical platform and the horizontal platform, they replace your gun. So like while it's going, while you're on it, after you shot it, even while you're riding it, you can't use another weapon. So like I feel like it would have been interesting to kind of have those things separate. So it's like you can use your platform and then pick your weapon and then like ride up and shoot at enemies from the platform, and it could like add this whole other level of like the way you approach combat too, not just navigation.
Yeah,
I think that would be the easy solve, Joe. Right? Is like making sure that it's just limited to if you're using an item or a weapon, you can only use. Like say you're using weapon, you can use an item, or say you're using item, you can use a weapon. But maybe they just weren't able to get around that. And my worry there would be like, then what's just stopping you from spamming item to like almost break the platforming?
Well, you
of this
only
game.
have because you have ammo for the items, right? I mean,
No, I know, but I'm saying like the levels are only so long or so tall anyway. But like theoretically, there are certain platforming challenges that if you can use item 2 is the jet, and then spawn item 1 the platform, you're kind of always guaranteed both a horizontal and vertical advantage.
Well, that's not what I mean. I mean, if the jet, the platform, and the wall climbing thing are all items, and then the weapons are weapons. You can be on the jet and you can still fire your gun.
Right, and I agree with you there. I'm saying like I just don't think they could have programmed them to because they're all in the same menu screen.
Right.
I feel like it'd be impossible to be like, no, these ones can only be shot at the same time, given that, that you need to go into that menu and change to be in that form.
But do we know, I mean, is it, on the NES, is it asking too much? I really don't know, to say like, okay, well maybe just hit select and you can cycle through your platforms, and then hit start and you can cycle through your
I don't think it was a technical impossibility. I think it's a combination of they didn't think of it and game balance. Like it's definitely not technically impossible to do both, because there are moving platforms normally in this game. But regardless, I do think that it would, if they balanced the game correctly, it could have added another layer. But it's not the end of the world that they didn't, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. It feels like it is a step on the. It's like, okay, they improved from the first game. Maybe in the next game they'll improve that, and like, okay, now how can we? It does feel like it's like an iteration on something that'll probably get better in later Mega Man games.
Yeah, because like select as like a cycle through your power-ups or even just your platforming power-ups is a great idea, Joe. And I'm kind of surprised that we're still like cycling through a long menu, especially once you get to the Wily stages, that like you have every single power-up. You have all these different things, and they just have like one letter attributes for what they are. And it's not that hard to remember that B is for bubble or anything, but it's just like, it's a little more convoluted, or they could have made it maybe a little dressier, where like it actually takes you into a screen where you would see, like a description of what it does or something like that, or see Mega Man's colors change or something. I don't know, something cool, but that's just a nitpick there. I feel like the select through the thing is a much more elegant way of dealing with like changing in real time, and the menu screen as like a pause element and changing your item kind of prevents you from doing it like often enough. Like I feel like if I was just able to cycle through the weapons while I was playing, I might use more, but because I have to make the active choice to pause in the menu, select which item I want to use, a lot of times I found myself just using the regular charge beam.
Exactly. I mean, I remember back in I don't remember how long ago, but the first Mega Man game I played was Mega Man 8. And I think it was just like the shoulder buttons switch between your powers, and you would see his colors change in real time and the little indicator change. So, I mean, just by virtue of having all these things to play with, I would just like get crazy and I want to play with this thing now. Like whereas you don't really have that level of creativity in this one, because it's kind of a drag to go to the menu and come back. In this one, you're more like, well, I know that this is the correct strategy, or I have formulated that this is the correct strategy, so I'm going to change now. So it's just like it encourages different kinds of play.
I think it's time to talk about the most interesting part of any Mega Man game, and that is the power-ups that you get rewarded from the Robot Masters and stuff like that. in this game, you have the air shooter, the crash bomber, the time stomper, the quick boomerang, the metal blade, the bubble lead, apparently. I just thought it was a bubble. I don't know what lead means.
Bubble
It was
lead?
lead.
But would it be a lead? Like,
I mean, I don't know what that
It falls
means
to the
either.
ground, right?
Yeah, it falls to the ground, but then it's just like a bubble, right? It doesn't like...
It's a metal
I don't-
bubble.
It's a metal bubble. There you go.
I don't know.
Okay, it's the bubble lead, and it's the atomic fire, and then finally the leaf shield. Say what you will about, power-ups and shmups and stuff like that. Power-ups in Mega Man, and specifically in this Mega Man game, it's like, they're a totally different type of beast because, like, you really do feel like each one makes you a little stronger in a totally different way. Like, I'm kind of confused about which one I should go after first, considering the usefulness of all of them, right?
No, it's
Yeah.
the metal one.
Why do you like the metal one so much? I feel like that one actually sucks, though, right? Like
The metal one
I
is,
know
I
I just
think,
said they're all
strong,
great, but
but-
like
No,
it doesn't take down metal enemies.
Yeah, but it takes down almost every enemy, and you have a ton of ammo with it, and you get enough ammo pickups that it's basically unlimited, and it's like the weakness of 3 bosses.
Like I went bubble first, and maybe it's just because I went in a different order than you, Sean. But I found it very useful on like at least the very next level, where there were a lot of enemies that I would just
half the stuff I used the bubble on, it just bounced right off.
I mean, same after that, but I feel like there were so like it does have the element of like rock paper scissors, where it's like does this beat that kind of thing, but it also to Mike's point like gives you other like it does more than just like hey bubble type damage does good against fire type enemies. It also like each bubble damage bubbles go along the ground and hit enemies that are along the ground, and you got the leaf shield, which is good against certain enemies, but also puts a shield around you, which I found really useful and interesting, and made me think about levels in different ways. Like, it's cool that it's not just like type advantages, but there's also like a function to each of these.
Yeah, no, I do like that.
Yeah, the leaf shield specifically too, of the having a way to like not have invulnerability, but to have a like a little shield for a second, and then choosing the direction that shield like flies off in is also a cool thing. Instead of
I think this is the best
power
designed
forward.
one in terms of it having more than one use as like a defensive and an offensive weapon. It has very different mechanics than most of them. The leaf shield is my favorite.
Yeah, it's up there for me too. It might be mine as well.
The one thing I didn't like about this bubble, that I think Joe just said bubble 8 times. The one thing I didn't like about it is that when you get to like one of the later stages, I think it's like Wily stage 4 or something like that. When you get to that, you have to use the bubble to detect where like the holes in the ground are, right? Like that's the idea, is like because the bubble goes right to the ground and then flies across the stage, it will fall through these pits and then you'll know where the pits are. Why wouldn't they just like gray them out a little bit, or like make you pay attention a little extra? Like that to me is it's no consequence to the bubble design of the weapon.
Yeah, it's
or
kind of
anything
a
like that, but it's a
weak way to give a weapon another use.
right. Exactly. That's more what I mean. Is like, yeah, it's still a cool weapon and everything like that, but now it's like a tedious requirement instead of like an actual fun part of platforming.
I don't know. I sort of because when I first got to that part where you're falling through, I was like, okay, this is one of those major flaws with this game where it's like, okay, this is just kind of cheap. There's no way. There's just like it's just a way to make it harder without you knowing, and you might just die until you learn the level. But then like when I thought about it, when I like realized you can use the bubble, I actually thought that was kind of a cool mechanic too, because it makes you think about the levels and the power-ups you have and like what do you have at your disposal. Like the whole game has these little puzzly elements, like a little bit where it's like, well, what can I use here? Like, why would this work on this enemy? But then it's also just like, well, how can I learn this stage?
I guess I'm thinking about it in a different way, where like that would be a cool moment. I guess I like watched enough things to know that like, oh, this is how you know where the holes are. But if I'm just like trying to brute force this, and then I realize, oh, I could just use the bubbles, and this is like so much easier, I guess then I would feel a lot better about it.
Yeah, it's satisfying, at least from my perspective, having not known anything about, like, I mean, other than it's a Mega Man game, about, like, what these power-ups do. It was satisfying to, like, stop for a second and be like, okay, how can I, like, what has the game given me at my disposal? And then, like, remember, okay, the bubbles hug the ground, maybe it'll fall through. And, you know, that was just a cool, it didn't, like, they could have done more with it. It was just, like, 2 screens that, like, had that ability, but it was a cool little puzzle to solve.
Yeah, or you could just use the jet and fly across those platforms.
Not all of them, though. Not all of them, because some of them you couldn't. Some of them were too narrow. You couldn't fire the jet out. I tried it, or if you fired it out, you couldn't jump onto it because you were like wedged in between a ceiling and a floor.
See, but now, like, even though I just found this out, like, you're revealing it to me, I'm disappointed. Like, it should be designed in a way where you can use, you know, like, Mega Man has such a huge arsenal, you should be able to use a different combo of things to get across these stages. Now to find out, like, oh, well, your jet's not useful there, it's like, well that's how I want to solve the puzzle.
You could also just guess.
But it's useful It's useful earlier in some of those parts, but then when you get to the top, there's one where now you can't use it anymore. So if you were using it, you'd have to think like, okay, well now what do I do? You know, it's like, I solved it that way, and like, now what do I do on this one where I won't be able to use it?
Well, now I love it again.
But then, no, I'm just kidding.
Right. Now convince me I hate it. Yeah. Anything else to say about these power-ups? Obviously, like, we talked so much in the first episode about the rock, paper, scissors mechanic. I don't think we need to go over that again. But I will just say, like, the overall, like, amount of use these power-ups get from someone like me who doesn't think about the strategic matchup of enemy-to-enemy basis. I still feel like I'm underutilizing these power-ups.
Well, that's also because, like, there are some that are just not all that useful in...
Right. That's what I'm saying. I'm going to blame the game here.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming myself. I'm not a bad player. It's the game that's not encouraging me to be more
It's
creative.
the game that's wrong.
Right.
I would say that, like, the boomerang, kind of dumb. The explosive that you plant, I think it's got, like, 4 or 5, like, environmental uses in the game, and it's kind of unwieldy otherwise.
And there's that one boss that you have to have a full stack.
Exactly.
I
have never gotten to that point, but I watched enough about this game to know, like, that's sort of the nightmare level. It's some of them are just too situational. Like the whirlwind is like only good in one direction. Like they gave, like, again, the metal thing. They gave you the opportunity to shoot in 8 directions with that, and the whirlwind is only good in one. So why not just use the metal thing? Unless you really just want that color that it adds, that you're using a different weapon. So I don't know. They could have done a lot better at making them all either just as useful or at least just as fun to use.
Yeah, I some of them had that. I feel like I was pretty impressed that most of them I felt like I had reasons to use a lot. But yeah, the wind one or the air one, not super useful. There were 1 or 2 times where it was nice to get that, like, weird, like, exponential curve angle of it. But and widespread. But then the one that bothered me the most, I think, was the I'm forgetting all the real names of these, but the bomb that latches onto things because of what you guys were saying, where it's like, I think it was cool to use it in that battle where you have to blow up all those little turrets on the wall or whatever those little bubble things are. That was neat, but it felt so artificial of a reason to ever use that. Like, it's the only time you ever need to use it because they just designed a quick boss battle where you need it. Where there was no time in the actual game where I was like, oh, I could really bomb something right now. Except there, once in a while there's some walls that you can bomb to get through to get to, like, some secret areas.
Not often enough to make it feel like it's very organically implemented into the game.
Exactly.
And why does bombing make that turret thing just, like, disappear immediately? Like, you don't even have to wait for the bomb to go off. It just makes contact with it.
I thought at first, because, like, the shape of the bomb that you place, it looks like it was just, like, covering up the, like, the wherever the
turret.
the turret or whatever wherever the
just
lasers
plugged
are
it.
coming out of. But yeah, and then it blows up. But yeah, I wonder if that was just I don't know, some weird limitation where like they couldn't get it to stay and have the thing on top of it and still fire or whatever.
We've talked about a lot in the game so far, and one big thing that I want to talk about, and big meaning I don't have much to say about it, but it kind of irked me, is I still don't feel like the movement in Mega Man is as good as, you know, some of the other platformers that we praised on this show. And I don't know what it is about it that's just not quite there, but it feels a little stiff being Mega Man.
He's still a little sticky. His jump, unless you're underwater, feels like you should have like a few extra pixels added onto the end of that. I mean, it's still like in the top 10% of movement mechanics I think we've seen in NES games, but you're right. It's not at the level of Super Mario.
Yeah, and I'm not asking for him to be like floaty or anything, but even just like, you know, sometimes there are platforms that, you know, require like, you know, being very close to the edge to jump to land on the previous platform, and that's fine. Like, that's just something that NES games do. You know, a lot of games on the Essential Games list have that flaw as well. It's just that with Mega Man, you don't get like that. You don't get that running feel. You don't get that build up, that momentum and everything. And I feel like maybe it's just throwing me off, but in games like Super Mario Brothers or Ninja Gaiden, I just felt like I was more in control of my character, whereas Mega Man is really powerful, so it feels easy to just, you know, stand your ground and fight off enemies and wait to move on, right? There's no rush to move on, whereas in Super Mario Brothers, you kind of always want to move forward, because every time you stand there, you're either at risk of running the clock or getting hit, which is, you know, you only have 2 hits. In Mega Man, you got a pretty sizable health bar. You can always get it back. And you are strong. So I just feel like the movement is something that I can't quite put my finger on it, but I wish I was just more agile as Mega Man.
I think it might have taken a bit away from like the actual shooting aspect of the game. Because if you're too agile, I think that would make the entire game easier. And I think the balance of having this slightly crippled Mega Man boy that's got all the guns. I think that has like not a perfect balance, but it makes it feel like a Mega Man game and not Mario with guns.
Yeah, I think that like for me it feels like he doesn't have like the type of like weight that Mario has, where he's got like momentum and he skids to a halt, which oddly makes it feel more like easily controllable. Whereas like for Mario, it feels like he's got this like weight that's combined with agility, where he's like fluid and moving around. Where like Mega Man feels like, I guess like he's just got weight, you know, like
he's
but
some
I guess
kind
he's
of
a robot,
robot.
so that's maybe what they are going for. But you know, I do feel like the motion could be improved upon. But I also agree that I think if they did improve on the motion, they'd have to redesign the game slightly to like account for that, because I do think it would make it a little too easy, and maybe it would discourage you from using power-ups. Because there were even times, even with this motion, where I was like, okay, screw this, I'm just going to try and run past these people, and I did a couple times. And I feel like if I were playing as Mario in this game, you know, with that type of movement, I feel like I could blow by a lot of these enemies.
Yeah,
that's an interesting thought, because like any time that you're just struggling in a particular stage, provided that there's no like major pitfalls or platforming that you have to do, I feel like you have enough health that sometimes it's just worth it to take the initial knock, right, and then use your invincibility frames to just kind of get past everything. And that's not really a trick that we see often on these side-scrolling games, but because Mega Man is it's moved in like a grid-like fashion, right?
Yeah.
You're in a square and then you move to another square, like Metroid style. I feel like you get away with that a little more. And it's only later in the game where they make that not so possible, given the platforming perils. But through a lot of the, like introductory stages, you could just run right through a lot of things to just make sure that you have, just enough health to get to the Robot Master and take him down if you have the appropriate power up.
Yeah, I remember at least one situation where I kept dying at a certain point, and like there was an enemy that kept hitting me, but then there were spikes, and I knew that if I touched a spike while I was vincible, it would just immediately take my life. But if I got hit by an enemy and then went into the spike, it wouldn't kill me. So I used that as a little bit of a workaround and just traded a little bit of life for a little bit of time. There's definitely strategy in taking damage.
Wow, you're playing next level there. That's
I was just lazy.
Okay, we've done enough talking about,
MegaMan.
Just the first half of this game. Isn't that crazy? Like, we've been mostly talking about just the Robot Masters and that stuff. We've occasionally mentioned Wily Stage 4 for some reason. That one really irks us. But, like, there is a whole second half to this game after you beat all 8 Robot Masters, which is, I'm not going to say that that's, like, hours of gameplay, but that's a pretty substantial, like, game in itself, right? Then you all of a sudden have to do, like, a series of even more challenging platforming levels where the bosses are arguably much more challenging, only to be followed up with a boss rush of all the previous Robot Masters again, just like they didn't learn their lesson from Mega Man 1. They were like, oh, let's do that again. That was exciting.
Yeah.
And then you actually have to fight Dr. Wily, don't forget. You would think in a normal game, and this, I think we talked about this in the first episode too, in a normal game, you would defeat the 8 Robot Masters and then just be, like, summoned to a boss fight with Dr. Wily, right? Like, that would just be the center screen. In this one, it's like, you have reached stage 1 of, 6, right? There's, like, 6 Dr. Wily stages.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy that there's that many. I want to get your opinion just on, like, the thought of that, right? That in a game where there is a password system and there's a lot going on to it, does, like, the game being divided between the 8 Robot Masters and the 6 Wily Fortress stages, like, does that feel like a cohesive vision, or does it feel like all of a sudden the difficulty and size of the game has just ramped up considerably?
I think that it feels cohesive, honestly. I suspect we said something like this in the original game, because it's the same thing in Mega Man 1, correct? Where after...
Yeah, but I think there's only 4 stages.
Right, okay, so it's a little... So, like, they went a little further with it this time. But it gives you this kind of cool feeling where it's like, especially with the password system, where it's like, at first, you're just going through, you're just getting stronger, you're fighting all these... It's like you're preparing to go on your actual mission, And then, like, once you've beaten all of these Robot Masters, you might be, like... You might have taken some time to do that. You might have especially if you're playing on difficult mode, you might have really been, like, learning and practicing, and now you have all these power-ups. You've upgraded this robot to as upgraded as it can be, and now you're like, okay, now I'm ready to, like, go take on this mission. It's like that's all, like, the prep, which is a fun game in and of itself, and then you go on, and it's not just a boss battle. It's this whole, like, progressing through this, I don't know, castle or fortress or whatever, fighting more bosses, revisiting old bosses, and then fighting the final battle. But it's like, it gives you the feeling like, well, if I had come here before when I didn't have all these power-ups, probably would have done a lot worse. So, like, that makes it feel like a satisfying progression.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of the structure of the game where, beat these first 8, and then you've got pretty much, like, the second half of the game that's a much more linear affair. Like, I think that's a cool structure. I guess my problem with it here is that they don't really have as much fun with these levels, either aesthetically or design-wise, than I think they were with the Robot Master stages. I don't know how you guys thought about that.
Yeah, no, it's like, I get what you're saying. It's mostly just a dungeon, a cave, if you will, and it's very closed off, and a lot of it is, like, there's no sense of, thematic entry to like I wasn't expecting to fight a big dragon at the end of Wily stage 1, right? Like it just all of a sudden it just kind of happens. It's like, you got to his big lab, and then in the basement there's a dragon with a bunch of floating platforms. It's like, sure,
big
why not?
Potbelly
right?
dragon.
Yeah, big potbelly dragon. Like, I think that's the idea of like just being in a dungeon, right? But it's just all very closed off. If you look at like the moment-to-moment gameplay in any of the Wily Fortress stages, a lot of it is like, oh, you really can't jump that high, or oh, you really can only fall this certain way because otherwise there's spikes. There's a lot of pits and stuff like that. It's not very welcoming, and I guess why would Dr. Wily's Castle be said to be welcoming? But it's not as fun as a result of that either.
Yeah, it's very much based around just like skill testing, and not like, oh, this is a cool idea. It's like, no, avoid the spikes.
Yeah, I can see that too. I mean, I guess they were probably trying to like make it be like, okay, now it's all about what you've learned, and it's not about, I don't know. Yeah, it does feel like it strayed away from that like really interesting level design, and it just kind of went for like, okay, now it's just difficult, which isn't the end of the world. But yeah, it would have been nice to have some new interesting curveballs to be thrown in there.
But I will be damned if, the Mecha Dragon or whatever he's called, and the Bulldozer guy, if those two aren't, like, so much cooler than the Yellow Devil, and also more fun to fight than the Yellow Devil. I get it, the Yellow Devil has a pattern. If you figure it out, it's easy. Trust me, I've watched videos on it. I still can't do it,
Wait,
so I'm
what's
just
the
bad
Yellow
at video
Devil
games.
again? Which one?
The Yellow Devil was the
game.
guy... Yeah, first game, he appears... He's got like a bit, he's like a cyclops, and then his body morphs over to the other side of the stage.
Into chunks.
Oh, right. Yeah, it was awful.
You have to dodge the blocks. It's
That's
awful.
right, yeah.
Whereas Mecha Dragon, it's like, yeah, you can only take damage in the head or whatever, and if he hits you, you could fall off the platforms and stuff like that. But as long as you're on the top platform, I feel like you're going to fall onto the other platforms, so it's just a matter of
it's not as
back up to the
much
top.
of a frustration battle.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know, it's just like, they look better, right? They all of a sudden, like, the sprite quality. You could fool me with that Bulldozer guy. Like, I would think that's a Super Nintendo graphic.
Yeah,
really.
It's very much in the keeping with the design that sort of went along that this game went for going forward several decades. It's kind of timeless.
Yeah, and I just, like, overall, I think the boss fights in Wily Fortress are great, with the exception of the one where you have to strategically use your crash bombers that you don't run out, only because, and here's my problem with that, Joe, before you tell me why it's good. The problem is that there's no, like, way to get more of that, so if you screw up, right, it's like, it's just over, right? Like, you have to wait till the turrets kill you, and then you have to start that stage over, and I just feel like there's got to be a better way to handle this. Like, you have so many other power-ups, and the only thing that can take them down is the crash bomber. There should have been a loophole.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that, too. That, and there's another instance in the final boss battle where, yeah, it's the same thing, where I feel like without any warning that this is what you're going to need for this battle, if it doesn't feel good to get there, realize you just don't have enough ammo to beat it, and there's no way of getting ammo, and then having to start the level over and remember to keep the ammo. Like you should have some warning, just so it's not just like get there and then realize that that's actually some of the same type of problem that we had in the first game, where it's like you get to the point, realize you needed something earlier, and have no choice but to die and go back to earlier. Where it's like, it just feels like a waste of time.
I think that the easiest way that they could have solved this was, like, I don't know, have some easy mob also moving around the stage that you could kill, and I don't know, half the time it would drop some of the ammo, instead of you just sort of being alone with the turrets. Like, yeah, it makes the boss a little bit harder, because then you also have to deal with just keeping an eye on these other little mobs running around, but at least it's beatable.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and Joe, you talking about, if we just want to jump straight to the end here for a second, the Dr. Wily fight is so bizarre, right? In so many different ways, too. Like, all of a sudden you're in outer space. He's on a flying saucer. You're standing on nothing. And then he transforms into, like, an alien that, like, I don't know. Was Dr. Wily an alien all along? Like, I don't get this part. I don't understand it. Is MegaMan high as fuck? Like, what is happening here? But every single item is useless except for the bubble lead or bubble lead, whichever one you choose. There's just something wrong about that. See, the whole game wasn't building up to the, like, you know, the all-powerful bubble weapon.
But see, if it wasn't for the fact that you didn't know going in that you need the bubble and you could just run out of, like, when I first got there, actually, I'm still there now. I didn't beat it. I only got to the final boss, but I ran out of bubbles on, like, when he had, like, a little bit of health left, and that's the only thing that can hurt him. And, like, if I had known that, now I know that. Now I can go back and go through that whole last part of the fortress again and try and get a bunch of bubbles and save up. But, like, that's what bothers me. It doesn't bother me that it's the bubbles that beat him, because it's just such a weird ending that he turns into an alien. Like, it almost feels like, of course it's the last thing I would think, because he's, like, so not of this world. Of course it's, like, the one thing you would think wouldn't hurt him is what hurts him. Like, that's fine.
Like
to
in
me. It's
Signs.
just that, like, I never saw it, but spoiler alert.
Oh.
Did they beat him with bubbles at the end?
No, don't worry about it.
But
this game was the prequel to Signs.
I figured.
Okay,
but
Joe,
yeah,
wait, one crazy thought here, because, you know, you're a reasonable guy. I'm just going to tell you, the bubble thing is ridiculous. It's not a good idea that it's the only thing that can take him down. The game is based around you acquiring all of these power-ups and becoming the strongest version of a Mega Man. You're a guy who has all of these different things. You took down all of his robot masters, right? Why wouldn't... Like, honestly, I'm surprised that they didn't go the other route and say you have to have everything. Like, you have to hit him, you know, he changes color in an alien life form, and you have to make sure you use the Crash Bomber when he's this color, and the Metal Blade when he's this color. Like, I'm surprised they didn't do that. And that sounds like bullshit, too. I wouldn't enjoy that. But at least that would make more sense for the game.
Okay, yeah. If your argument is that you think that you should have to use, you know, it shouldn't just be one power-up, I agree. Especially, the whole game took you through that. It shouldn't just be one power-up. You should have reasons to use them all to get there. But if the argument is that the bubble thing being ridiculous is wrong, I disagree. I think that it's ridiculous, and that's great. I think it's hilariously ridiculous. I love that. But
the bubble thing is fine with me because, like, that's water, and he's an alien, so he's not used to, you know, like the bacteria in our water, and that killed him.
Immediately,
you know?
killed him
exactly.
immediately.
Yeah.
Well, 14 shots of bubble.
But like water is life for us. But he is like this like weird alien. Water is death for him. I don't know. It felt right.
My opinion, you should have only been able to beat him with Omni Slash.
Yeah,
Zeta-Flare only.
If they really wanted to insult the player, right? That, you know, Dr. Wily would strip you of all of your powers and be like, "Oh, you thought those power-ups made you stronger? Like, I control those power-ups and I'm deactivating them," or something, right? He created those robot masters.
At least that would feel like a bit more of a fully formed idea.
Yes,
it wouldn't be
this
fun.
Just feels ridiculous.
Yeah.
I like the idea of somehow the final battle should incorporate everything you've learned. I totally agree with that.
Or not. Just make it this way you only have your blaster. Or you only have the platforming power-ups. You have to keep dodging all of his shit until he depletes all of his energy
I think
by
that would
shooting
suck
so much
too.
of his life projectiles at you.
Yeah, honestly, I think that the best solution is, to me, I think that it's actually not a bad idea that, like, when he changes color, you have to figure out what to use against that color or something. Like, that's not a bad idea, in my opinion. I think that would be better than the way they did it. But, you know, just to continue playing the devil's advocate, you could look at it as, like, the whole final fortress was the, like, learn to use all your power-ups. Where, like,
he's just the bubbles.
And he's just, the bubble one, and he just happens to be the last one. But, like, yeah, I agree that the end, the final battle should be like, okay, now put everything to use.
I really think they had, like, a really, you know, and I'm speaking with hyperbole here, but, like, I feel like they had a amazing, like, game here, and then they just threw out the playbook on the final boss. They said like they almost like took a break for 6 months and then said like, oh yeah, we never finished programming that final boss. I don't know, hit him with some bubbles. Like it's just so far away from the ideas of what Mega Man is and like what the game was about that I'm just confused by it. And obviously like that's a little extreme, but I have to say it. Like I really think that the Dr. Wily final boss thing is just a mistake. The other 5 levels leading up to it are so much better.
One of the
we also
biggest
didn't mention that.
game design.
I mean, once you guys discovered the bubbles, did you ever switch to another power up?
Never.
I'm serious. Like in that battle, and that once you discovered that the bubbles are what hurts him, did you ever then go back?
I didn't actually get to this point.
What you realize once you've taken some damage down is that not only are all your other weapons useless, they all heal him back to full health. If you hit him with anything else, even your regular blaster, he's back to full health immediately. 1 hit.
Why wouldn't he just design the bubble to do that as well?
Maybe it was an oversight on his part. His hubris is what killed him. He didn't think water could possibly hurt him.
Also, here's the thing. If we're out in the vacuum of space, you can't have bubbles. It would just non-bubble, you know?
Well,
that's a great point, Sean.
Maybe it's there's nothing inside it. It's just a circle of water. It doesn't have to be filled with air, right?
Well, what's expanding the bubble to be a bubble?
Well, or the air that you generate this.
Well, now there's too much.
Now
there's too much air in the bubble, and it's going to pop because of the vacuum of space.
Yeah, it pops right on him.
Think before you talk.
It pops right on him. You can have some sort of bubble. Maybe there's a field around it. You know, it's
a force field bubble. Is that what it is, Joe?
Bubble, yeah. Lead. They're made out of lead. They're not going to pop. Come on.
You
Tell
got
me
me
to use
there.
my brain. Yeah, that's right.
One thing we missed, we didn't talk about the energy tanks at all, and those are optional things that you can find across the various stages. They usually make it a little bit of a platforming challenge to find them, and you can bank these energy tanks, up to 4 of them, and they will completely replenish your health. And if you use them anytime outside of a boss fight, you have to really question what you're doing. You have to really sit down with yourself and ask yourself, why am I replenishing my health now? But if you're just using it during a boss fight, wow, what a great addition to have these energy tanks. Kind of makes me wish that they also had power-up tanks that you could store in case you were going up against the Crash Bomber turrets or, Dr. Wily's alien forms. This way it was like, oh, if I'm out of bubbles, at least I saved
this box of bubbles,
tank.
Yeah.
Right. So this convenient box of bubbles from Toys R Us, because that's where people buy their bubbles. At least I have that.
Well, I see.
No.
I thought when I first saw those, because I actually didn't notice I was collecting those. Like, I didn't notice I was gathering those till towards the end. So I had a couple at the end, and I thought that they were going to let me, like you said, either give all my health back, or I thought I could select it and then select whichever power up I want. I thought I could just fill up 1 bar of anything.
I did sort of think that's how it worked the first time I used it as well. But I mean that was a godsend for me. I wouldn't have been able to get as far in this game if I didn't have those energy tanks. And I think it also speaks to how the difference between Mega Man 1 and 2. Like Mega Man 1 had a lot of weird holdovers from an arcade experience that never existed of this points and there's nothing, the points are just there, and they drop that, and now they add something that is really only useful for consoles, that and the password system. It seems like between 1 and 2 they finally figured out how to be a console game, but having these energy things, you would never see an arcade game where you could just use an item to get back to full health.
Right, yeah. You're losing money.
Yeah. So I thought that was just a cool little aside there.
And what about that creative password system? No more remembering random strings of letters or numbers or a combination of letters and numbers. Instead, just fill out this dot matrix.
Remember this QR code.
Yeah, I like it better now in the age where I have a camera in my pocket all the time and I can just snap a photo of it. It'd probably be easier to remember like a numerical or letter code if I was just committing it to memory, though. Not that I feel like anyone just committed it to memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Sean, you're like the mathematician of the group.
Math magician.
Math magician of the group because you make magic with
You
math.
killed it on Sesame Street 1, 2, 3. So.
Yeah.
That's true, except for your opinion on the menu. But here's the thing. Am I wrong in thinking that like this is a pretty easy password table to brute force into like getting some kind of result?
You're right. Like there are only 2 options for each field.
Right? It's like on or
yeah,
off,
on
right?
or
Like
off.
dead or alive.
And instead of 24 or however many, I guess 30. I don't know how many letters are in the alphabet. You don't know me, but
26 letters in the alphabet.
plus 10, so 36 characters for a password system. Like, yeah, you could definitely brute force this to, I guess, end up at any random point in the game, but why would you do that?
Right. I guess, it depends on what age you are. If you're,
it sounds
if you're
like
6,
fun.
that could be amazing.
Yeah.
If you're 36, that could still be amazing. It just depends on how you want to play the game. Maybe that's like a fun challenge, is like, enter a password and just see where you wind up, and you have to do the rest of the game from there.
That's fun.
I don't know about that, but that could be like a fun speedrunning challenge. Like somebody starts
I like
a little bit ahead, or different enemies or bosses already defeated, so like then they have to race each other to the finish.
Yeah, but that can lead to being like really unfair really easily.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Forget I ever said it.
I will. Already done.
Cool. One note on development, because I don't want to get into, like the whole like making of the games and everything like that, because obviously like a game like Mega Man 2 has a lot of information about it. But this is the game where Inafune joined Mega Man 2, and he is now the guy who made that like Mighty Number 9 game that everybody hated, but backed with millions of dollars. He is like known as the creator of Mega Man. He is not the creator of Mega Man. He's just the guy who made Mega Man what we think of Mega Man today. So I guess Mega Man 2 is a game a lot of people still really love, because they would fund any project that this guy makes, to the point where they let him make Mighty Number 9. And the developers allowed input from the general public in Japan for boss designs throughout the game. Capcom received 8,370 boss submissions for Mega Man 2, and they kind of gave an answer that sounded like they went with none of them. But that would be like impossible.
Oh, really?
Right? Like somebody else comes up with Woodman.
I thought that was really cool, and I just recently heard, I don't know if it was true or not, but I heard that ever since Mega Man 2, like everything but Mega Man 1, all of the bosses were fan designed. Is that not true?
Well, I think what they're trying to say is like, that they don't say like, you're the winner or something like that. Instead they look at the fan designs, draw inspiration from them, and then make their own. So basically that's their way of saying that they're stealing from you.
Yeah, I assumed that they like designed on top of it, but I thought that they were like, hey, send us your idea, and someone sends in Woodman. And they're like, oh, great, I'll make these couple changes and put it in. But like, I thought it was like largely still that person's design. I could be totally wrong.
Got it. Okay, I don't have enough on that. So maybe the friendship got a little bigger over time, like the trust with the community. But in this game, they say that they took inspiration and made the designs their own.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Sequels and spin-offs. I don't know what you want to hear from this, because there's a lot of Mega Man games, and I think we've gone over them all, and we're going to play a bunch more. Don't forget, we have Mega Man 3, Mega Man 4, Mega Man 5, and Mega Man 6 still left to play on this very console. Isn't that crazy? We're not going to see another Metroid game on this console, but we're going to get 4 more Mega Man games.
I love it.
I guess that's good.
Well, yeah, at least half of that is good. The Mega Man part. I'd be happy to see more Metroid games too, I guess.
Do you guys like look forward to Mega Man 3, let alone Mega Man 6? Like, would you say that you're more excited for Mega Man 3 or Mega Man 6, if that makes sense?
I mean, just knowing how little the core design philosophy of these games has changed, like, I can't say that, like, I can't wait to see what they improve on, but I guess I'm interested to see, like, oh, what kind of goofy weapons / bosses are they going to have now? So, that's kind of how I'm feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for the next thing, and I do feel like that there's a time and place, in my opinion, for like just making another iteration of your last game. I think about this a lot with, like, I know people really want to, like, change, some people really want, like, Pokemon to be, like, changed to, like, a new format, add a defense button, like a defend button and things like that, or like make it like an action game. And, like, I think things like that are cool if you make a side game that's like that. But I think that there is some merit into, like, hey, let's keep all of the core gameplay elements, keep it the same game, and just make a better one. Or make one with different, unique things. So people can always come back when you play a Mega Man game, you know what you're getting into, but you're still discovering all these new things. It's like, hey, it's just like all the last Mega Man, but now I have this power-up, so it lets me do this. Whereas I feel like a lot of other game, like, franchises sometimes try to evolve too quickly into a whole new direction, and then that, like, makes it feel like it's a totally, different game. I mean, Final Fantasy is another example. I mean, modern Final Fantasy 15, I'm sure it's a great game, and I'll play it at some point. But, like, when I sit down and play it, like, that does not scratch the itch of a Final Fantasy game. So, like, I respect that Mega Man will always be like, hey, more Mega Man with new ideas in it.
Yeah,
if that makes any sense.
I kind of agree, yeah.
And I'm sure there are, like, seasoned Mega Man fans listening to the episode right now that are like, oh, Joe, if you only knew.
Yeah, I can't
like,
wait to
I don't know where it goes either,
but
but I'm sure there's got to be a point where they lost the trust of the fans.
Yeah. I think you know.
No. Well, you just have to think about it, right? Like, what Mega Man 8 was like PS1 times.
Yeah.
And then, like, Mega Man 9 took, like, all the way to the Wii to, like, get released. So clearly, like, something happened there, right? Like, there was a rift, either whether it be sales or just design philosophy that, like, took them so long to come up with 9. But then there's also a huge gap between 9 and 10 and then 11.
But they
like,
had all the
just,
X's, too, right? Like, those were...
Yeah, but the X's also stop at 8. That's kind of interesting.
That sounds like a
right?
conspiracy.
Like, what's wrong with the number 8
in
Mega Man? And that's why Inafune went on to make Mighty Number 9.
To skip 8 entirely.
Yeah, see? Yeah, just skip the number 8 and go right to 9.
Yeah.
All right, and then, in terms of Mega Man 2 stuff, there is a Mega Man 2 on the Game Boy, but it is not Mega Man 2. It is not this game. It is not these bosses. It involves Dr. Wily coming back again in an attempt to take over the world, and this time he's stolen the experimental time skimmer from the world's Chronos Institute and uses it to travel 37... Now it says 0.426, but that can't be right? Like, it's probably 37,426 years into the future. But I guess you could go 37.426 years.
That might just be a European thing, because they use dots instead of commas.
Got it. All right. And yeah, Mega Man is got to go into the future as well and take down Dr. Wily. A lot going on with this Wily guy. He's an alien. He's a time traveler.
Dr. Wily.
He sounds a lot like, yeah, he's like Biff from Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Wait, Biff was an alien?
Biff.
No, Biff was an alien in Back to the Future 4. He just didn't read the script.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, that's not true.
I didn't believe you.
There is no script for Back to the Future 4. Don't look it up. What else? Mega Man 2 also got, in 2019, for its 30th anniversary, it got a re-release of the NES cartridge from Capcom. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that.
Like an officially licensed NES cart of Mega Man 2.
What year was this?
2019.
Wow. Oh my god.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I mean, what's the point of that?
Well,
it's cool, I guess. Like, what?
Why would I ever want to do that,
funny.
Mike?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, like, they made it cost a lot of money, so people thought, like, I'll buy this now while it's a collector's item, and it will skyrocket in value. and then it turns out they made just enough for all the Mega Man 2 fans to have it.
Yeah.
So nobody else is seeking it. But I think it's blue. I think the cartridge is blue. So does that intrigue you at all?
like blue
Actually,
stuff.
that changes things. I mean, I guess it also, it helps preserve it a little bit in its hopefully original form. I'm assuming they didn't change anything, so I mean, that's nice.
Yeah, but don't you think they just put like a retro pie in there?
Yeah,
or
probably.
something? Like,
In the cartridge, you don't even have to.
Yeah,
you don't even have to put it in your NES. You just play it on
You just plug a
on the
USB
cartridge
into
itself. There's a screen on it.
on the back of the cartridge is an LCD screen, and you just play right off of that. All right, that's a bit of a tangent, but that's all I have for sequels and spinoffs really for Mega Man 2. I mean, this game has lots of re-releases, but not that much changes. I'm sure there are subtle changes. I'm not going to get into it because we have gone too much into Mega Man 2. We've been talking for so long, and we need to wrap this thing up on a thing we call the Essential Games List. Sean, you first. Give me your vote for Mega Man 2 on the Essential Games List.
Mega Man 2. Huh? Like look at that. Like this is Mega Man 2. I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, we didn't even like talk about a lot of the other stuff with this game, like how iconic the music is, and that's pretty much it. But I think that this is a game that sort of does live up to its reputation in terms of like why it has a legacy. I had a lot of like nitpicks with it, but I do think that quality-wise, it is an improvement on an essential game. And it's not just like more of that essential game. So I would say that this is also an essential game.
Thank you for your vote, Sean. Joe, your vote.
Mega Man 2.
Huh.
I think that a lot of the things that we complain about in other games when it comes to enemy placement and like level design and just problems that other games have with pacing and just like feeling like a balanced game, Mega Man 2 is like the antithesis of all that. Like it is, I think that this is like a good example, even today, in 2021, to like point to as like as a template or like a good example of how to do good gameplay. And I think that shows throughout the whole game. I mean, every level you have to think about what to do next, but it never feels like impossible or rarely feels impossible. And the enemies are all like thought out where they are. You have to really think about like how you navigate through this world. And I think that adds so much to the fun, than just like the power-ups and the enemy design and everything, which are all also fantastic. And I also think, yes, we do have a Mega Man game on the Essential Games list. I know sometimes we kind of go in this direction of like, well, do we need two of them on there? But I think that is when one like makes the other obsolete. And in this situation, I feel like it is sort of what I was alluding to earlier, where it's like, it's an improvement on that original game. It doesn't, both are using this formula that works, and I think that it is better than the original game, but it doesn't take away from that. It doesn't replace it. So I guess I'm also like explaining why I don't want to eventually take Mega Man 1 off the Essential Games list, while also saying that I want to put Mega Man 2 on the Essential Games list in a roundabout way. So yes, I'm voting it essential.
Wow, and that means it's an essential game. I still get to give my vote, of course.
Yeah, but you don't need to.
It's in.
Yeah,
it's in. The only thing I guess I'll say is Mega Man 2.
Huh.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing about Mega Man 2. It's like a no-brainer, right? If Mega Man 1 is an essential game and Mega Man 2 is better than Mega Man 1, well, then what do you have? Of course you have an essential game. Never since I first sat down and played the game, and I played this game, before nostalgia, so I guess that's a little cheating, but I knew this was a good game. I knew it was a great game, and I knew it was going to be on the Essential Games list. I'm really happy that after playing it the last couple weeks, that reconfirmed it for me. Sean, you were talking about how, we just didn't talk about, a lot of the iconic stuff that this game revolves around, and I think that's true, right? Yes, the music is amazing, and even, the Mega Man in Super Smash Brothers is based off of the Mega Man 2.
I mean,
all the power-ups and stuff.
That's where I saw all this stuff first.
Right. It's like, it's in the, like, this game is the DNA of a Mega Man game, and regardless of if, like, we try to use the argument again for Mega Man 3, 4, 5, where it's like, yeah, it's Mega Man again, even better. It's like, something about Mega Man 2 is just like, it's larger than just an improvement. It is now, for me, the Mega Man game. That this is the standard I'll be holding them up against, too. And I don't know if I agree with Joe. I think Mega Man 1, on my outlook, on my horizon, the best of 1989, I'm looking at Mega Man 1, and I'm saying, you might be next, kid. Because here's the thing. Mega Man 1 had a lot of frustrations, but was overall a great game for 1987. Or 1988, I believe. No, 1987. I'm going to say 87. I don't remember, but that's what we'll go with. Mega Man 2 still has its frustrations, but I had to really reach out for them. We were talking about things like, the final boss doesn't quite deliver, right? But, like, is anybody throwing BioShock off the Essential Games list because the final boss sucks? Like, I don't think so. And we were talking about, movement's not quite there yet. It's like, yeah, but, like, for where we are in game design, it's not really a noticeable difference unless you're playing in 2021. The point here is that, like, the influence that this game has on this genre, on Mega Man games, and just on, like, if you're a fan of indie platformers that are coming out today, right, there's a good chance that you're going to love Mega Man 2. Is it kind of hard? Sure. Is it NES hard? I don't really think so. I think this is the kind of game where, like, you just have to play through a level a few times and you'll have it down pat, and they give you enough health, and there is that easy mode. Honestly, if I'm having a good time with this game, you can too, because I'm not that great of a video gamer, and I had a great time playing Mega Man 2, and I felt good as Mega Man, and that's the most important thing. You're the Mega Man. You want to feel mega, which is why when you fight Dr. Wily, all of your attacks should do damage. You should be thumping on his butt. Like, you should be all over him.
It's just Sean's, like, quiet, like, whoa. That got me.
Mega Man 2 is absolutely on the Essential Games list, and it only took us, like, 90 minutes to get there, but here it is, and I can only imagine that next week when we play Monster Party, we're going to go into just the same amount of in-depth analysis and reach the same kind of conclusions. Right, guys?
I can't wait.
Absolutely.
Everybody's heard of NES's Monster Party.
Right.
I haven't, actually.
Oh, interesting. By Human Entertainment, the totally not robot.
That sounds suspicious. I think the monsters made that game.
Yeah, Monster Party is the game that we're playing next week, and the reason I bring that up so soon after a Mega Man segue is because you should always want to know what game we're playing next, because we want you to play along with us. If you listened to 90 minutes of Mega Man 2 and you didn't play Mega Man 2 leading up to this week or following this episode, I'm not saying that you're listening to the show wrong. I'm saying you're doing yourself a disservice. Mega Man 2 is a game worth playing, and next week we're going to find out if Monster Party is a game worth playing. Joe, anything you could say to the listeners to make them play Mega Man 2 this minute?
I think that knowing that Sean and Mike voted it on, and they didn't even vote Zelda 2 on, that means that this game must be like, it must be doing like godlike feats, because I don't know what could... I don't know. I just feel like I need to bring up Legend of Zelda 2 every episode. So let's take a listen. Take a listen, and then let us know if you agree that it should be on there, and more importantly, let Sean and Mike know that they're wrong about Zelda 2.
Yeah, Mega Man 2 is at least as good as Operation Wolf.
Oh, at least.
At least as good, according to our Essential Games list. Of course, that's not really how the list works, but if you have feedback and you want to write to us and let us know that we made a mistake or we didn't make a mistake and that we're a great podcast, the best way to do that is at NestalgiaCast on Twitter. That's where we're posting stuff all week. You better believe we posted some great Mega Man 2 stuff all week long, and you better believe that people commented on that stuff too. Now, don't go and count the comments because, we record the episodes in advance. I don't know how many people commented, but I'm sure we got some comments on some thoughts. And Mega Man 2 is a game that we'll probably keep using as a reference point like we do with Mega Man 1 and Super Mario Brothers and Legend of Zelda 2, Metroid, you name it. That's the kind of game that this is, and that's why it's just going to be like in our nostalgia dictionaries now. Sean, parting words for the audience.
All right, just because you had a bad day at the office, that doesn't give you the right to park in a handicap spot. It's really not cool. Like I think like anybody who needs it is gonna tell you that like, hey, I'd really appreciate it if you wouldn't park in a handicap spot. So, just do that. Just be the bigger man and park in a regular spot.
Is this something you've encountered recently, Sean?
Nah, just something I've been thinking about.
Oh, okay.
No. You're adding that. It just says he's back.
Yeah, he's back, but like he's back. This episode is posting on October.
And also, what is he adding?
Back.
Extra A's in back?
Okay.
I think it's okay. You want me to say
okay.
Mega Man 2, he's back?
I want you to
do what you did.
I want you to say Mega Man 2, I'm Cluku for Gaga. I still don't know. I have no idea what that means or what that's referencing.
That's not even when we were reading the back of the boxes.
I know. But what was it? I don't want...
I just said that.
I know, but I thought it was like a reference to something.
Goo goo for Gaga.
Wait, okay.
All right, we need to start.
That is.